In a second-hand set of dimensions, on an astral plane that was never meant to fly, through wavering star mists, see the Grey Satuin. Drifting onwards through space, atop the shell of the world's turtle, are 4 giant elephants, upon whose broad shoulders rests the Discworld. Welcome to Dining Table Discworld. We're reading through the Discworld novels and discussing them at our dining table. Be aware there will be spoilers for the current book and others in the series.
Hello, welcome to Dining Table Discworld. I'm Dave.
I'm Kathy.
And today we are talking about Men-at-Arms, the 15th in the Discworld series, published in 1993. So, what's the synopsis?
The Ankh-Morpork Night Watch is expanding, with 3 new recruits from different minority communities. There's Detritus, a troll, Cuddy, a dwarf, and Angua, who's also a woman. Captain Sam Vimes is due to marry Lady Sybil and retire as the richest man in the city, something he has no training or inclination for. The murder of a pillar of the dwarf community raises tensions between feuding groups in the city, and means the new recruits have to get stuck into crowd control and detecting quickly, as a deadly new weapon has the Watch and the guild folk in its sights. The disorder in the city is enough that Carrot goes on an unorthodox recruitment spree to keep the peace. On the day of Vimes' wedding, it's a race against time to catch a killer.
Excellent. Okay, your initial impressions.
So this was a very early Discworld read for me, which explains why I probably didn't like Guards so much, because this is definitely the first Watch book I read, and I think one of the very early ones I read. And I liked it so much, and it felt a little bit like reconnecting with an old friend. I found I was rereading so many bits I went through, because the Watch book, they're very conversational. There's a lot of characters in pairs talking as they're patrolling, or there's a lot of specific conversations all throughout the books.
Yes.
And I mean, you have that in Pratchett generally, but I think these ones, or at least this one, I sort of particularly saw it. There was a lot of bits where I kind of kept rereading sections after I read them, because I was just like enjoying the conversation the characters were having. So yeah, I really liked it again, still.
Continue to like.
How about you?
Well, I think at this point I was reading them in order, rather than the early ones where I was just reading them bits about it. But yeah, so obviously I did it the other way around. I did it the proper way. I read Guards first. I like the kind of the ensemble guard books. Obviously later on we get it becoming the Vimes show. But I like the early ones where you've got the group of the...
Well, it's kind of bringing together, isn't it?
Yeah, so this one is the, and I suppose...
There's a few that like that before they get...
You kind of build, these are the, and then next, which I've forgotten the name of.
Feet of Clay?
Feet of Clay. Yes, Feet of Clay is another one where you're kind of building the Watch up. And then it starts drifting into this is the Vimes show, which is less fun. But I like all the different characters you get, in the Watch books, and this is great fun. Yeah, more of Ankh-Morpork, more silliness in the Watch.
Yeah, it occurs to me because the copy of the book I had is the one which has the ensemble at the front, and everyone's kind of charging forwards. And it occurs to me that although Angua is a little more scantily clad than one would be if one was patrolling as a police officer, it's not quite as, I'm going to use the Pratchett term, titsy, as some of the other Josh Kirby covers.
She is missing quite a lot lot of her uniform there.
I mean,
still.
In fairness, that outfit doesn't look particularly comfortable.
Or
I mean,
warm,
or
protecting.
But the point is, it's not. It's not as titsy as some of it. She has some, fairly cool, although admittedly very long boots.
She's got to have something on her legs. She's got nothing else.
That's true. She does not appear to be wearing anything besides a weird metal one piece, now that I look at it. But I don't know. I think when you consider what covers there would be in the bookshop at the time I was choosing them.
Very, very much so.
And she seems to be actually doing something rather than just
she is leading the way in some respects.
She's kind of central to the picture. So I don't know if that had an effect, but it's a thing I'd noticed. Also, I think this cover is kind of then how I think of a lot of the characters. Just again, because it was the first one I had. And it just means that it meant that reading Guards later, I was like, oh, this is how this started. But it's like, well, it just feels incomplete because I already knew all the later characters. And I think the main reference to that in this book is Carrot saying about him being so simply arrested the Thieves Guild for stealing.
Yes.
Sounds like we're both in favour.
Yes.
Yes.
Be terrible words through this podcast if we weren't in favour of.
So one thing I wanted to mention, which I didn't mention in Guards, because as we discussed, that's very much a weird little guy's underdog book. But now, as we've alluded to, the Watch is changing, it's growing, it grows quite a lot in the course of this book, it becomes more a proper police force. And so I just wanted to sort of mention the word propaganda, because I think in these times, well, not just these times, but I guess the word exists now, the idea that people who are writing police procedurals quite often, even if they're pointing out some of the bad stuff to do with the police, they're also glorifying it a bit. Now, I don't think that was Pratchett's intention. He does show how policing isn't great. He does show how his characters in various ways aren't great. And he was, I think, reacting to issues that were around in policing at the time, and unfortunately often still are. There's always problems when you've got communities and people policing those communities that aren't members of those communities.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff I'm going to say now, I think, is a problem in the UK, but we're privileged enough not to kind of have to deal with that in our own lives. But it's obviously a very big problem in the US. These books have bits where I think maybe in this one, Vimes says something about the difference between, police, coppers and soldiers. But obviously in the US, things are very militarised there, which is an issue. Certainly here in the UK, I know that there were, back in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of reporting about racism in police forces. I think that's where something that's improved, but still far from perfect. Same with certain amount of misogyny, certain amount of homophobia, things like that. Individuals are fine, but obviously the structure has it. Organisations have issues within them. There's been various things recently where we live. Yeah,
and about the Mets, it's.
Yeah, the Met Police is worrisome.
Yes, so unfortunately these issues haven't gone away.
Yes, absolutely. And I think Pratchett was sort of partly shedding light on how policing could be different and also some of the issues with it. He very much presents kind of like old school guards compared to the newer recruits who obviously are from what... See, I keep saying minority communities, which is not the word he uses in the book. The word he uses in the book is very 90s, and we prefer not to. But yes, it is a thing. And I think it's just worth saying that anything that depicts police from the point of view of police, even while pointing out problems, can also kind of glorify that, and that we are aware of that. And if that's something that people would prefer not to deal with, maybe this isn't the series for them quite, or the sub-series for them quite so much. Yeah. But yeah, it just seemed worth kind of saying.
Yeah, and I mean, it, as well as, it also links into current American issues with DEI, hires for diversity, which obviously...
I mean, that's not what he calls it. Well, basically, they just keep using the word ethnic, don't they?
Yes, but they are forced to hire people from, groups
minority
that they haven't got representation of, which is, we have seen lots of, both in the UK and America again, kind of pushes to get people in, not just cops, but, everywhere, to bring in other viewpoints.
I guess a diversity of experience.
Yes.
Because obviously the US is rolling that back now.
Yes, and I think this book goes to show that, they definitely do bring, this is the whole point you have these people along, is because if you didn't have Detritus and Cuddy there to
calm things down, when the
to kind of show that it's things would have gone very differently.
Although I do think there's an element of that being it's a very liberal point of view, but also perhaps a little bit simplified. It's like, we've got these two.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, we've got these two communities that hate each other and are constantly feuding. But we put two of them in the police, and now they're friends, and that'll help. And I guess it does, and there's an element of when people are in contact with each other and helping business differences. I suppose the book isn't entirely about that. And in fairness, there is a later book that is much more about that. So I guess we'll get there.
Well, just,
But I think it's also the fact that you've got Vimes, Colon, and Nobbs, particularly Vimes and Colon, who are old school and are a bit... They still see their new recruits as very other. Oh, it's those lot.
Yeah.
There's still suspicion and not quite dislike, but sort of the feeling pushed upon that you have to deal with these people, which I think is a good depiction of how some people think, but it's a bit... I think that's where a lot of problems have come from, you know. The idea that people are being hired just because of that, and therefore they can't be as good as the core population. And actually the whole point is to undo historical prejudice.
This is a very complex subject that we're trying desperately to touch upon and acknowledge without massively bulldozing in and with our own privilege.
Yeah, well, quite, yeah. It just seemed worth mentioning. There's also a bit, so later in the book, Vimes ends up sitting with a load of rich people who he hates because he doesn't like rich people, despite very soon about to be the richest person in the city. Which is obviously uncomfortable for him. But it's hard to feel too sad for him.
I would like to be the richest person in the city. If anyone wants to give me a load of money so I can be the richest person in the city. Different type of city, though. So.
I don't know how you're getting them. Anyway. And these people are saying incredibly prejudiced things, especially about dwarves. And all these, you never see their women. And he's there anyone who's spent any time in dwarves knows that the women and the men look the same. They're all bearded. Basically, there's the implication that they eat dogs. And I was like, that's familiar. So this book in 93 is a bit this racist stereotype still happening. And it's sad we don't seem to get past any of this.
No, it just changes who it's targeting.
There's a bit where Vimes actually starts egging these unpleasant rich people on, kind of to make fun of them, except I think only one other person there understands he's doing it, and she's not happy about it, so it doesn't really do it. It just sounds like he's agreeing with them. I think he's doing it to kind of... I think he's trying to darkly amuse himself.
Well, also try, almost to point out, to get them to say... realise how ridiculous some of the things they're saying is.
Because the way you do that is you're like, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Could you explain? That's where you get them to explain until they're actually saying something unpleasant. This was just him agreeing with people and getting them to say more and more. And I think he was doing it because he was in a bad frame of mind and also a bit drunk and was just kind of amusing himself. Look how awful these people are. And even though Sybil later agrees that they are kind of awful, that she can see what he was doing and she doesn't think he's worth it, he shouldn't be doing that. But there's the fact that Vimes sees himself as better than he's, I'm allowed to be unpleasant to these people because I have to deal with them. And it's that's not great. But again, I think Pratchett is right. He's trying to write this small-minded character, but who does improve, but he's not there yet, so it is a bit uncomfortable in places.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, so
moving on.
We covered that bit. I mean, I've got another quite social theme thing we could do, or...
Well, let's get it over and done with at the start.
We're getting fully into that bit of Discworld. We've already had small gods.
Yes,
know?
I mean, I think this is definitely, we're in the Pratchett rails against the frustrations of the worlds that he dislikes.
But he also made it funny and inventive, so that's why we're still talking about it now. This has been memed all over the internet tons of times, but the Captain Samuel Vimes boots theory of socio-economic unfairness. The reason the rich were so rich, Vimes reasoned, was because they managed to spend less money. Take boots, for example. He earned $38 a month plus allowances. A really good pair of leather boots cost $50. An affordable pair of boots, which were sort of okay for a season or two and then leaked like hell when the cardboard gave out, cost about $10. Those were the kind of boots Vimes always bought and wore until the soles were so thin that he could tell where he was in Ankh-Morpork on a foggy night by the feel of the cobbles. But the thing was that good boots lasted for years and years. A man who could afford $50 had a pair of boots that'd still be keeping his feet dry in 10 years' time, while a poor man who could only afford cheap boots would have spent hundreds of dollars on boots in the same time and would still have wet feet. So people attach this quite a lot, because it's still incredibly true. I would say that things have moved on a little bit from this, but sadly not in a good way.
No.
In that, a lot of things have become less quality, or there is even more planned obsolescence in the things we use. And you have to be very, very wealthy to buy your way out of that. Well, there's the whole conspicuous consumption thing, the idea that showing you're well off involves buying a load of new stuff all the time, even if those things work, but sometimes those things don't work for very long. You're not encouraged to repair things, that people should more, and there are people campaigning to make that more of a thing. I think France recently passed a right to repair law, good for them. It doesn't mention cobblers in this, for example. I'm presuming that would be a bit of an expense, but you can, I did recently pay to get some boots fixed.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. But even people who are comfortable are still having to deal with a lot of this stuff. Also, a lot of things are just less good quality. I mean, the cost of clothes is one of the main things that's actually gone down over the years, but the quality has dropped massively, and the human rights abuses that are still behind that are even worse. And that's how clothes are so cheap. And it means we're not encouraged to look after things. It says about Vimes wearing his his sole's really thin. But people quite often don't do that. There's a lot of throwaway stuff. So I thought that's got worse. A recent thing that's only referred to as the new boots theory, posted by Tay Zonde, which I saw fairly recently, but it was posted back in 2018. It's a little bit more of American context. Being poor now just leads to more poor later. Can't pay to clean your teeth, next year pay for a root canal. Can't pay for a new mattress, next year pay for back surgery. Can't pay to get a lump checked out, next year pay for stage 3 cancer. Poverty charges interest. And somebody said, this is like a new boots theory. And obviously that's in very American context where you do have to pay for like all healthcare, whereas here you only pay for some. But again, it is the point that you just make do with stuff. And then you have something that costs more later, or you have to throw out later and buy a new one. Yeah. And And again, this is the thing. I mean, Vimes' whole thing is that he's very working class. He's from that background. He's risen a bit for his job. Obviously, later we'll see yet more as it. But he's very uncomfortable in anything that isn't that setting. And I think these books are where Pratchett puts that kind of class consciousness in quite a bit. Because I suppose in the other series, it doesn't... I mean, there's probably bits and pieces, but it's different again because it's where you've got like urban poor as well. And if you get rural poverty, but in Lancre it kind of seems like everyone's sort of in the same boat largely, apart from they've got a king, but it's not like they've got like a whole strata of nobility or anything. So that's not more like everyday person level. Whereas this kind of there's more comparison.
You've got the lows of the beggars and then the highs of the not dukes, but
the nobility.
Yeah, you've got
they still have despite not having a king, because I guess that revolution only went so far.
Yes, I think they were willing enough to go. Okay, no, we're not with him. Anyway, we'll get to the
at some point.
Yes, I think the boots theory is a.
It's a good way of thinking.
It's a good way to get people to start thinking about it as well. Because I don't think until you hear that, you don't necessarily think about it so much. And
a lot of stuff is set up purposely to target the impoverished.
Yes.
Just look at that whole thing with British Gas when they installed the prepay meters, which charge higher in the homes of people who were worse off, whereas then people who were better off got better discounts.
Yeah.
Or the way like some meal deals and things work, there's stuff that just is kind of worse for people who are worse off, which is like, this is the wrong way around, it should be.
I mean, why target the people without money? Target the people with money.
But the people with money, the people with money will complain about things a lot though, and they'll just take their business elsewhere.
But they've got the money to actually have, so anyway, we're gonna get...
We'll not get into the whole like problems with society, it will never end.
No.
Let's just stick to the book, shall we? But it's just again, it's a thing that was pointed out in the 90s. This is a good shorthand for it. It's on the internet quite a bit,
and this is where it comes from.
Shall we go into like the characters?
I was going to say.
So Vimes, we've talked a little bit about where he is.
Not as drunk as I feel he should be. Well,
we thought that in the last book. I actually thought he'd be less drunk.
I was expecting a little bit more. They don't really handle his alcoholism. He does get drunk in this.
It's handled more after he goes properly sober, which maybe is that's how it works though. I feel like I don't hear any people who are drinking a lot talking about their alcoholism, but I do see people who are purposely sober for a certain amount of point talking about it because they're celebrating milestones and things.
I suppose it's not a big deal in this, but it's just like I kind of felt he was either...
I think I'd sort of half thought when you got with Sibley stopped drinking, but clearly we're not quite there.
I mean, he still is drinking, but not,
he definitely is
not
still drinking.
To the same extent.
Well, at one point he knows she doesn't like it, but he still kind of does it. And then she's saying to the butler, well, he doesn't want a drink. And he's like, well, actually, I kind of do.
Yeah. It's one of those, it's like, he's obviously very drunk in Garsgard.
Oh, yeah, he's obviously properly an alcoholic.
Yeah.
But again, not for as long as I thought. I thought it's like bad at the beginning and everything gets very busy, so it's hard to find time. And then the dragon drank all his booze.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those... I ate all the bottles as well. I think it's just one of those things that I kind of feel like it's not glossed over, but it's kind of... This happens a lot quicker than it really happens in real life. But it is a book and a story, so we'll just, you know... I think it was just my first...
And we've already mentioned how he's prejudiced, but aware of it. His prejudice is based on his experience with people.
Yeah, I've got to deal with them, therefore I can call them these highly offensive names.
And it's like... No. But it does mean he looks down on, dislikes people for ignorant prejudice, but he doesn't seem to be at the point where he's quite investigating that in himself. Like, it was not okay for these people to why do you get to be prejudiced as people who you're interacting with? Isn't it actually almost worse at your interaction day to day and your prejudice. But he's not there yet. But again, like I said before, it feels like Vimes is kind of highlighting that as
And to be fair, it is an equal opportunity prejudice, because he's equally prejudiced against dwarfs, trolls, and the undead. I mean, it's not like he likes what, he's...
Well, at present, that's I think shifts a bit.
Yes, it does, but it's like at the moment.
Yes,
he's just any of them.
Anyway, so we'll go on to somebody else now, as it's not yet the Vimes show.
No,
Carrot.
He's still here and still a dwarf,
but by adoption.
Yes,
So he's still like 6 foot with flaming red hair. He's in the city, he's man of the people, he knows who everyone is, everyone knows who Corporal Carrot is. There's a bit where it describes him walking around, it's like he wears essentially like a cape. And I'd forgotten that, but it's very, kind of like if somebody's walking through nature, they look, they belong. Carrot's clearly done that with the city, he's kind of been absorbed into it, and he's become part of it. But as we know, this is sort of probably Pratchett playing with the whole, the boy who would be king.
Yes.
Thing.
This is the thing. He is, and they do go a bit of the, we see the sword again, and
the thing you want to be impressed with is the guy who put the sword in the stone.
Yes,
and then yes, I think Pratchett was a bit like, what if we had somebody who had the powers of a mythical king, but doesn't want to be king, just wants to walk around and police the city. Yes. And it's sort of referenced in the first one a bit, where it says, the king will come back to, serve and protect.
Yeah, he's very much... I think he's got... kind of in the back of my mind, he kind of feels like he knows that he could be ruling, and kind of goes, you know what? That's not for me. He's a very, very...
Well, they keep calling him simple.
I wouldn't say simple.
But the book does keep saying it. Everyone sort of sees it. I mean, in the first book, he was a bit, he was very literal, but that's because he was raised in a place where I think there was a lot of literalness. Yeah. And I feel like we don't see that later, but I guess we see more city dwarves rather than people raised in the mountains as much, although there's a mixture. So, like anyone who's moved to a place, he's gotten used to how things are there, which I think anyone does, even if they're not the mythical ruler of that place. But he really has. And the fact that he has got to know everyone and he's just really nice. They say he's simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy and doesn't mean there's no complication. He's just very sort of straightforward. And there's an element of he's learning stuff and he's not letting him change him. And in fact, Angua and I think Vimes both kind of think that the way he's able to... I say kind of control people, but manage people, is that he thinks everyone's decent and jolly and good underneath it, and he's so earnest that everyone wants that to be true for him, so that's why they do stuff, which is a possibility. The one thing I didn't like was the bit when he talks to Angua about the undead.
Yeah.
Because the whole point is Carrot knows everyone, he's friendly with everyone, and he does seem to know the names of the people that also board at Mrs. Cake's, but he seems to be like, I'm sorry, I just don't like the undead. Which, I mean, again, if you're wooing somebody, maybe best not to be... Well...
To be fair, he doesn't...
But even if somebody isn't... You don't just sort of make... I'm going to talk about a group of people I don't like. It's like, I don't think other people like to hear that early on. So that felt a bit out of character. Vimes, you get it, that's where he is, but Carrot, it seems a bit
I'm wondering whether that it was kind of put in because of... the reveal for Angua later.
I think it's partly that. I think there's also an element where both Carrot and Angua have a moment where they make assumptions and embarrass themselves in front of the other.
Yeah.
So for Carrot, it's that bit where he says he doesn't really like the undead, not knowing that Angua... I suppose I haven't said it, but Angua's a werewolf, which in this is undead. We'll get to that. And when he finds out she's boarding at Mrs. Cake's, he's like, even though he originally boarded a seamstress place when he first came to the city. So, but he didn't realise that's what was happening. And it's clear that he's interested in Angua and she's interested in him, but his version of courtship is just going for long walks with people, and other women have been interested, because, I get the impression that Carrot's been written to be quite dishy.
6 foot,
being 6 foot and muscly is more a male power fantasy than a female fantasy, but plenty of women do like that. And again, he's obviously very pleasant and safe, which is more important.
Yes, I suppose. Yeah,
much more important.
Let's be honest. He was very popular at the
seamstresses.
Yes, because he was the girls knew that they were safe with him, and any problems he would deal with.
Yeah, but there's a bit where Angua... Her impression of Vimes is that he's just this drunk, which, kind of fair.
Yeah.
That's what she's in. And then they go rifling through his stuff, And she's a bit like, well, why is there no personality? It's like, he earns more than you, and you have a room with stuff, and this place is just sparse. And then she finds his like little account book and says, oh, he spent it all on women. She makes an assumption. She's reading it all out. And Carrot's getting more and more angry because he knows Vimes and he likes Vimes and he understands how noble Vimes is. And so she's sort of acting like, oh, I spend it all on women and booze. And it's like, no, actually the women he's spending it on are the widows and orphans of watchmen who died on duty.
Yeah.
And that's where Vimes is. That's why Vimes, despite being the captain of the watch, is wearing cardboard-soled boots.
Yeah, can't afford
because almost half his wages are going to support people who the city should be supporting but isn't.
Yeah.
And that's why, though problematic, Vimes, you're like, yeah, okay. Like, he's got solidarity for his people. And there's something this about, a lot of watchmen only know watchmen. They live in the watch houses. When people go to funerals, there's only watchmen there. Yeah. And it's very much like that was almost the life Vimes was going to be in.
Yes, that was his trajectory. But yes, Carrot.
So we get more of him, although he's not very sure about romance. Detritus.
Man who knows his rocks. I think...
Troll.
That's true. So this is the third outing for Detritus. We've seen him grow from a splatter in Guards.
Yeah.
To a heavy in moving pictures.
A heavy who fell in love.
Yes.
You met Ruby.
A romantic heavy. To a...
Lance Constable.
Yeah, that's it.
And then later acting Constable.
Yeah, he gets... There's various promotions during the book. But, he has gone to join the Watch because Ruby is not going to be, wooed by someone who, trouble without a job, so...
Well, I think you've just been moving around a bit and you want to find something to,
and I think Ruby was definitely influencing.
Well, he's got somebody he wants to...
and it's better than being a splatter, so,
So he ends up being partnered up with Cuddy quite a bit, who is a dwarf, and this book, I think, is the main first one that goes into dwarves and trolls hating each other and being hereditary enemies.
This is where we find the...
Because Coon Valley is mentioned.
The spillover from Tolkien's elf-dwarf rivalry.
Sure, yes.
Detritus, so we'll talk about Cuddy in a moment.
He was next.
But Detritus, we get to see more about trolls and their unique physiology.
So far, they've just been big rock people, and in the first...
So in Colour of Magic, when you've...
Light
Fantastic.
Well, they kind of just appear as heavies a bit in the background. Then, Light Fantastic, that you meet the rural ones who are asleep during the day.
And turn to stone and during at sunlight. So I'm not sure how they're sleeping. And
well, that's it's the Scandinavian thing.
Yeah, I know. But the point is that we get rid of the whole turning to stone.
And the reason that them and dwarves don't like it is that dwarves are miners and they are stone.
Yeah. But we look at their physiology, so it's an interesting thing that when Detritus is getting locked in the Port Futures warehouse, which is an entire bizarre idea of
especially
Port Futures.
A big freezer.
I know, it's not a freezer.
Somehow.
No.
It's definitely very cold.
Yeah, but that's due to the temporal disbalance.
Yes, but that makes it effectively a freezer.
Yes, okay.
I'm just giving you what it is like.
But it's caused by the temporal disbalance, the fact that the pork coming into existence. It's an entire thing. But anyway, so the idea that obviously trolls are silicon-based life forms, and the reason that they are considered stupid when they come down, when they're in the lowlands, is because their brains are overheating. And
when your computer gets too hot and the fan has to really work.
So, and they don't have fans.
Until
Cuddy makes Detritus a hat with a fan on, which is basically just a beanie, but
Well, no, because the fan on that is above. The fan is actually cooling his head. The fan's pointing towards his head, I think.
It's a beanie. It's just a hat with a propeller on it. It's funny to think of it like that.
Okay, well, that's not what I was picturing at all. Okay. I think mine's more accurate.
Fair enough.
But the point is that the two of them are really setting up a partnership, because obviously initially they are always like, oh, you dwarf, oh, you troll, but then they're made to work together, and it's like, you're not dwarves and trolls on duty, you're just watchmen.
Yes. I didn't get to finish my point
about
the silicon-based, the brain. So he ends up getting trapped in this freezer. and he starts becoming a genius with maths.
Not sure why being good at maths is always shown as being the sign of a genius, but anyway.
Yeah. In this situation, he was shown to, and that this is because his brain is cooling down, and that's working at hyper speeds.
But then he does almost freeze to death.
Yeah, I mean, it's a trade-off there. So it's an interesting idea that, that actually trolls aren't as a species aren't as I can say stupid, but as
everyone assumes.
Yeah, as you come across, but it's simply because their physiology isn't designed to be operating at that sort of temperature.
Yes,
which is interesting. Yeah.
So shall we move on to Cuddy?
Yes, we'll move on to Cuddy. Yes,
Cuddy he's quite sarcastic for a dwarf. He seems quite got some sassiness to him. Because all the dwarf stuff we've seen so far has been exceptions, like Hwel and Casanunda, who are specifically dwarves aren't like this.
And
it's
Carrot.
like, well, I was going to get to Carrot. They're all exceptions. The point is, it's very much like, Hwel and Casanunda aren't like regular dwarves. It's like, okay, but what are they like? And then Carrot is kind of that, but he is adopted. So, he's 6 foot, but they're kind of being very literal and stuff. But he's very much was raised in, I think, a smallish dwarf mine in the mountains. So he's not part of a massive, massive dwarf community, and we've seen what he's like when he is in a big community, and he's very literal and stuff like that. But Cuddy appears to be a city dwarf. He mentions various cousins who work in different industries. It's also very clear that dwarves and trolls have become very embedded in the population of the city, hence probably this hiring initiative, because the different ranges of jobs that people mention. At one point, Carrot says something about ethnic makeup, as in the ethnic makeup of the city. And Carrot's like, I think that has something to do with Mr. Strong the Arm's cosmetics factory. but the point is, dwarves are making a lot of stuff.
Yes.
The murder that sets off the investigation is a dwarf craftsman, very skilled one. But we see stuff about burial weapons, how dwarves consider their workshops, and Vimes, who's known Carrot, who's human but a bit odd, because he's from the country, but also kind of a dwarf, but not really. But then Vimes actually meets, is dealing with actual dwarves, and Carrot's having to explain to him, and then Carrot takes Angua to a dwarf bar, and but Cuddy, is a dwarf. But there's also stuff when people are like, you know what they say about dwarves? And Cuddy's like, no, what do they say about dwarves? And the lady's actually curious, like, can you tell us what it is people say about dwarves? Which, again, the thing it's turned out to be is another racist stereotype, which is alluded to. But yes, so it does seem like him and Tritus partnered up in a overcoming prejudice kind of little bit.
Buddy cop moments.
Yeah, which is... But then you were going to say about Cuddy.
Yes, so Cuddy has the dubious honour of being the first, I'm going to use protagonist, but it's not really a protagonist in an ensemble, person we like, main character death in the series so far. So far we've either had side characters or, the antagonist ends up dead at the end.
I mean, I guess brother dies, but he's like 118, so it's like
I don't feel that it counts. Whereas Cuddy actually, is a character that we've been going through. He's been built up to being this.
He's part of the new members of the Watch. He, is part of as you say, the buddy cop, two people who wouldn't actually get on thing. He's one of the new recruits. The Watch is growing. He's in there. He's an acting constable as well. And then yes, I mean, Fairy does get killed off screen, but yes,
which I think is fair enough. But it's
I think it's just to show that how bad the antagonist and the weapon are.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a shock, but it's also not necessarily used as a driving force to the plot.
Well, no, it's towards the end, isn't it?
Obviously, Detritus is rather pissed off about this because,
they don't fridge him, which is kind of funny because they were in a freezer earlier in the book.
Yeah.
But the point isn't that Cuddy's death isn't the thing that makes everyone come together and do a thing. He's not like Coulson in the Avengers.
No.
But it is... maybe a sign that no one's safe, because obviously there is a fake out's death later.
Yeah.
Not that much later. And I think it's to show Detritus how much Cuddy meant to him, despite being a dwarf, but because they were, becoming professional partners. And just kind of, it adds more danger to other bits when other people are being shot at.
It wasn't a gratuitous death by any means, but it does come out of left field for...
It also gives a way of bearing the...
Yes, true. They do resolve with the how to get rid of the thing that it's caused so many deaths. So yes, it was a...
Yeah, it's sad, because you can see he would have been a very good and interesting character.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, we still get some excellent dwarf characters later,
yeah.
but, I think,
It's just they killed the first one.
Yes.
So, Angua.
Yeah, she's all right.
Well, you can say your bit first.
I find it, I wouldn't say annoying. I mean, to classifying her as an undead, I mean, I know this is what Pratchett's decided to wrap werewolves into that.
We've kind of taken the whole, horror characters.
Yeah.
Anything that's Transylvanian-y is kind of uber-bold, which they haven't said the word yet, but undead.
It is all undead. It just makes me, just doesn't, I don't want to say sit right, but it's just one of these things that go, that's kind of... But anyway, that's just me being...
I mean, she did survive being shot, so... Because only silver kills them, so that's kind of undead. Not dying...
But not undead, but...
Okay. Anyway, I've said this is an early Discworld with me. Yeah, I really like Angua, and it's just very cool. Because a lot of the time, people are assuming she was hired because she's a woman, not because she's a werewolf. And in fact, perhaps just the thing where people are going, she's a and then they get interrupted and Carrot assumes woman.
Yeah.
I mean, she's also the first woman watchman, but she's obviously an independent person. She's away from family. She's come to the big city. She's found a community of her own people around. Obviously, Mrs. Cake has changed a bit, because before she seems to be hiding that her daughter's a werewolf. Yes. Now she has an undead boarding house, and including ground floor rooms and long door handles that you can operate with paws. So, that's good for Ludmilla, isn't it? And, she's done that, and she's also the one when, Cuddy and Detritus, her fellow new recruits, are fighting. She's like, okay, well, we'll all go out for a drink, but you're with me and you're with me, so you're not with each other. Yeah. She's getting involved in things, and also she can turn into a wolf. Except when it's full moon, she has to turn to wolf. But that's the thing, the Pratchett's version of werewolfism, it does say there's a spectrum. Some people are just they need to shave a bit more on the full moon. And other people are sort of obviously kind of wolf men, wolf person type things, which, again, referenced in Reaper Man.
Yes.
But Angua's thing is that she turns into a full wolf. And she looks like some sort of fancy, purebred wolfhound, like a very fancy pedigree dog. But it's just really cool that she has this thing where she has two forms, and he writes this thing about her smell as vision. So, her seeing smells, or at least that's how her human brain can comprehend it, but then her wolf brain only comprehends the smells, and it's just really interesting. I really like the concept. I also noticed that he used the 8th colour as a metaphor for her seeing smells. He sort of mentions, how would you describe greenish purple to someone, which feels like a callback to Colour of Magic, because that is what Octarine is.
Speaking of the seeing colour thing, the Discworld Noir game did quite a cool take on it in the... mechanics for that. You could track things by seeing colours, so that's quite a...
No, that's cool. I'll have to look that up because it does sound good. But yeah, no, I just remember really liking that. And as a teen, I think after I read this, I very much became Teen Werewolf as opposed to Teen Vampire. Not that those were things set against each other that much at the time, because it was some time before vampires became a YA staple. But yeah, I was just a bit like, dog people, cool. And I think also just that she's obviously this independent woman who knows her own mind, knows what she's doing. The time when she thinks she's going to get run out of the city anyway, and she's obviously interested in Carrot, but also a little bit confused by him, and also a bit pissed off when he's prejudiced against the undead.
Yeah.
But she respects him, she sees how he is, she sees that he cares. The fact that she's wrong about Vimes and sees how much Carrot cares about him for being a good man, and she's like, what, if I'm going to get around to the city, I might not. So then she obviously makes a move on him, because he clearly does not understand what to do in that arena.
To be fair, where he was raised, it's already been stated that you have to be courtships has to be taken a certain degree of with carefulness, because you're not sure necessarily what's under
it was also pretty it was also pretty clear that he was being, one of the reasons for him being sent away was that other dwarf families in his community did not like that he was showing interest in I say daughter. We'll get into dwarf gender later, but it's sort of, at this point, there's still a thing, because at one point when the dwarf gets killed, Vimes goes to see the wife, and you're a bit like, is that the word they'd use? But anyway, I just really liked Angua, so probably quite a formative sort of fictional character for me. So, yay. She's in the books now.
Yay!
And then the last character I have listed, as someone's mentioned, is Gaspode, who...
The Return of the Wonder Dog.
Although he's not called that at all in this. It's just Gaspode. There's no...
To be fair, he's a Wonder Dog.
It feels a little bit like, not quite retcon, but it sort of changes what his background is a bit, because it doesn't mention the moving pictures.
I mean, he does mention that he saved how he saved the world.
And got no thanks for it.
Yeah, and I think
But it all suggests that maybe he could already talk or was already quite intelligent because he said stuff about sleeping at the high energy magic building and getting a load of magic stuff. So it doesn't seem like it was just the Hollywood magic.
I always thought
think was clear.
I always thought that it was always separate. It just happened to be the very similar.
I suppose all the other animals in moving pictures kind of reverted.
Yeah,
apart from whatever happened with the duck. We'll get to that.
But also, they were also much more classic cartoon archetypes where I wasn't sure where Gaspode really fitted in with those.
Well, I guess it was just like the sidekick to the main antagonist, which is what he was. Like I say, Gaspode isn't more than a girl. Anyway, in this, he's just still this mangy street dog, but he has the power. So this is where we really see Gaspode do his thing, and the people are walking along, and they'll notice a little dog, and suddenly they'll think to themselves, give the dog a biscuit. It's like, oh yeah. Or they'll kick a dog, suddenly think something very rude about themselves. Yeah. And basically, Gasper's doing that thing where he talks, but people know dogs don't talk, so they just assume it's their own head doing it. And then every so often, Gasper will then say woof or bark. And it's funny because when Angua first encounters Gaspode, being that she can talk dog, she starts querying him and dog, and he's like, no, don't bother. She's like, you can talk? So even she's like, oh, we're talking dog. It's like almost what you are. But then you kind of have that Gaspode is, this case, a sidekick for Angua. So it's the sidekick of someone who's only part of the ensemble. So it's the smallest part. That's another thing I like about Angua is that she goes and investigates and detect, like she wants to find out what's happening and get involved and solve the mystery. And of course she has smell to help her. And she can also sneak into places because if she just takes off her clothes and changes, then it's like, look, I'm a dog. So there's various bits where Gaspode sort of showing Angua around as a dog, and also, I mean, he's obviously interested in her, and so he helps with her inquiries because he obviously has a load of knowledge of the city at dog level. And Gaspode also mentions the Dog Guild, which is this odd thing where a load of street dogs have kind of been organised. It's not quite sure how exactly, or radicalised, basically.
Radicalised is possibly closer than that.
Yes, I think it is that. Interestingly, it reminded me of a children's book I read recently, which was written in the 50s, which is about a cat, in which there's a horrible cat that takes over things and has a similar kind of background. But yes, there's this dog called Big Fido, who Gaspard mentions, because these street dogs go around, they're basically any dog that has a collar or any dog that, like, whines or fawns or begs to humans, they attack it. So, yeah, very radicalised, very like, we're, apart from humans, we hate them and any dog that collaborates with them. And Gaspode is okay because he has the power. But then Angua kind of runs foul of them. And I mean, she's a big wolf, but there are a lot of them. And then Big Fido turns out to be a...
small poodle.
Yes, with a collar that says Fido and a horrid attitude and... quite insane, I think, is the suggestion.
You're absolutely barking mad.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
And then, yes, they get chased over the roofs, which is not where you think a dog's being, but there we go.
No.
Angua was a bit kind of odd-levelled anyway, I imagine. And then Gaspard has to demonstrate the power, because obviously he can talk humans. He can just turn around and go, bad dog! And the whole idea is that even though they've said, oh, we don't want humans, is that dogs are... they were wolves, but they've been changed by humans, and now they're human creations. And this idea that there's always the wolf and the human fighting inside them, which is why Gaspard said that Angua was very dog, because some of the time she's human, some of the time she's wolf. But does that mean she's dog all the time? And the fact that these dogs try to get away from that. I mean, Gaspard's very proud. He pretends he has, like, this family that loves him, but, they're a bit clingy, so he goes out on his own. But then when he's actually found a nice place to live, he flees it almost immediately. Because he's not suited for it. Also, can you imagine how many treatments he must have had to go anywhere near any children?
Yes.
He likes life as a street dog. And he's annoyed that he has to work around and with humans. But obviously, he has this power that means he can be particularly good at it. But I don't think he despises any other dog for it. But these dogs have seen what they are. They don't like it. And they've gone a bit, like, mad with it. Yeah. Which I guess happens to some folk. But yes, that's just an interesting sort of side bit. But
yes.
It sort of shows how the guilds in the city are increasing, because there's a lot of guilds mentioned in this all over the place. And some of them are obviously very old, like the Beggars is the oldest, as it turns out. And the Assassins is old. But then a lot of them are much newer. But yes, so again, just different bits of the city, because it's all, obviously it's so much of the city. So those are the main character points that I had. I think others are just like people who show up. So it's the first time we see Foul Old Ron.
We don't see Foul Old Ron. He's mentioned.
He just smells there.
Smell is there.
It doesn't yet seem to be an independent entity.
No, but his smell is definitely there.
Bloody Stupid Johnson is mentioned as a sort of landscape designer, and he does Patchett actually specifically mentions Capability Brown. Bloody Stupid Johnson also sounds a little like a description of a recent Prime Minister, but he can't have known that in 93.
No.
But we finally meet Leonard de Quirm, who's been mentioned twice previously.
And his inability to name anything with any sort of style.
Well, as it said, he might be a genius inventing and designing things, but he's a bit of a detritus when it comes to names.
Yes, and he's locked in this... It's not a dungeon.
It was house arrest.
But he doesn't really care, because as long as he's got enough paper and things to tinker with.
Actually, it's basically take on Leonardo da Vinci, because da Vinci just means from Vinci, in the same way that I guess de Quirm means he's from Quirm. But yes, it's this idea that he's drawing all these things. He's interested in all sorts of different stuff. He's this kind of polymath genius. They mention the Mona Og.
Yeah. But also he's the whole reason for the Gon to exist in the first place, because he doesn't actually design it. He just scribbles some notes down on a margin about something else.
Well, this is the point. He's doing these beautiful drawings, this very interesting, detailed stuff. I mean, we went to that Leonardo da Vinci exhibition in the museum some years back. But yeah, Leonard de Quirm is also drawing these horrendous death machines just in the margins as doodles. But then somebody made the thing. Well, in fairness, I think he had the thing made. But then he was, because he said he saw it, he said it was so much a made thing, he didn't want to destroy it. Yeah. Which I guess this goes into the murder and the police procedure, which we'll get to. Because I think at one point describes him as the most dangerous man on the disc. Yeah. But the point is, Vetnar is keeping him contained because he's useful. But before, he clearly was free at some point, because it mentioned him as being a daft old bugger who lives in the street of cunning artificers. Yes. I think that's what he's mentioned in Weird Sisters. Yeah,
I think it's at that point, it's like...
He was probably removed.
Yeah, he realised that...
but he was made comfortable. And now that you've mentioned it, the Gon.
So, the Gon is the worst part of the book. It's a rifle that de Quirm has come up with that was built... and then was supposedly destroyed...
By the Assassin's Guild.
But
they put it in a museum.
And I think the Assassin's Guild didn't want it around because it removes the requirements for their services. If anyone...
Their whole thing is they're up close and personal.
It's personal. It's not, whereas the Gon is very impersonal. It's a rifle, and the character wielding it is talking about, just seeing people as ants and just being able to snuff out their life.
It's like the idea of going to a higher place and just being able to sight down it, and But we're obviously in a country that isn't big on guns.
No.
Although it was after this that the kind of last big shooting wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, the idea is you got this thing, there's only one. The reason that the dwarf artisan gets killed is because somebody steals it. He's shown it to sort of fix it. Oh, I might make some notes. And the Gon gets jealous, and it's an accident, but it shoots him.
Yeah.
And there's one character who's brought up as the antagonist, who's very odd, isolated individual with strange ideas, who gets hold of it. And then it says that's the end of him. He still exists, at least for a while. But that's really where he... is gone. Because the point is, anyone who has the Gon, it's talking to them. It wants to be used, but it doesn't want there to be more of it. So it's this very creepy, insidious thing. I think Pratchett is making clear that he doesn't like guns, which,
that's fair.
And again, very common here. In these books, and we'll see later, crossbows are quite often used as the equivalent, this is the personal weapon you would have. And they are around, but this is painted as something different, but there's also, it has this sinister power, it's a voice in people's head and it compels them.
Yeah.
And one person was I didn't mean to shoot the girl, but it makes you do it. And then Vimes has a bit of a standoff with it.
Yeah.
It's basically this impressive made thing. And again, it's this idea that the Discworld stuff from other places, around world, goes through it and manifests. And it's very much corruption.
Yes. And I think it's used to affect, if we're talking about the sort of plot and structure of the book, because it is a police procedural murder mystery kind of thing. But the actual antagonist, It
introduces the person who appears to be the killer, and it shows him a bit beforehand, which is kind of what you expect. It makes clear, he's up to something, he's not great. And then it sort of says, and then the Gon gets him.
Yeah,
he gets the Gon, they get each other, and then for a while you sort of assume, we know who it is. But then more bodies appear that are linked, and it all gets a bit more complex.
Yeah, I think, that it's you do move on. It is another person doing it. But again, that person is not really... it's kind of that they're only a vessel. They're only the one getting the gun to where it needs to be, and it's the gun actually wanting to do the...
Yes, because, the first person is Edward Dieth, who's in the Assassin's Guild.
Given his surname, this is where... it's a very telegraphed...
What's interesting is, obviously, other than the dwarf who's killed, who's called Bjorn... He sees death, the character, but none of the other characters who... Oh no, Beano does, the clown.
Yes.
Beano the clown does, but the point is that Edward Dieth doesn't see death, or we don't see him seeing, because the whole point is we don't know quite at what point he's killed.
Yeah.
But once we know that's what happened, we're like, oh, well, who is it now? And then, it's...
Yeah.
It's the Dog Guild.
I
knew they'd do it in this episode.
So I think Pratchett writes this well as a procedural mystery.
It's
a procedural because it's the police doing the investigation.
Well, it's the police procedural type of murder mystery. Yeah.
But you do sit there and you're not never 100% sure of who's done it, but yet once it's revealed, you can sit there and pick up the pieces. The clues are dropped.
The clues were there. Some of them about smell.
Yeah, and they're well done. It doesn't come out of left field, despite the fact that it is a bit of a we've never seen this character before until halfway through the book.
No, we see him earlier.
Okay,
because at the Assassin's Guild.
That's what when they're trying the point is you don't see.
And he's the one that wants the watch to stop investigating.
Which
is why Vimes tells.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
Which is why the Prussian tells Vimes to stop investigating, knowing that he will. But he can say to him, "I told him to stop investigating," because obviously Vetinari. Because this is the thing, Vetinari winds Vimes up so much that he doesn't even punch the wall, and Vetinari's like, "Oh, did I go too far?" Because Vimes is due to retire from the thing that's been his whole life anyway. But then Vetinari makes him do it early, and then everything falls apart.
Yes,
for a bit until Carrot pulls it together.
I think he does a good job of keeping you guessing, but it is satisfying as an ending to get you saying that actually no, like this makes sense as somebody who would, it being mostly the god actually being the driving force to
Yes, because I'm not sure with the second guy quite why he does. Oh, again, it's just the gone, isn't it? Really.
It's surprising because the actual murderer person is the head of the Assassin's Guild. We already give a spoiler warning at the start of this.
That's true, yeah, we do. You'd think he'd be against it. Also, he had access to it the whole time. It's like it got activated.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of being...
But maybe he didn't touch it. Touching it, that's the thing.
It took a few lives, and then it came into his hands, and think he's not... He much likes the personal...
Yes, and I think what's also satisfying is then we see the watch become a thing because a dwarf has been killed and people are saying it's a troll, which it obviously wasn't because the troll couldn't fit in there and that's part of the investigation. But so the two groups who hate each other, there's, the city's in danger, Vimes has been sacked, so it means the Day Watch guy, who's a jerk, is in charge, but all he thinks is, well, the troll must have done it because the dwarf died, that's it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. We locked up the first troll we found. And so everyone's getting really angry and the watch house is a target. So then Carrot basically goes, right, there's been a breakdown of order, I'm imposing martial law. And then he goes and he recruits a load of dwarves who want to make trouble, a load of trolls who want to make trouble. The people at the armoury who told them they couldn't get the weapons, but they're like, well, we are going to get the weapons. A load of people in the street. And it's this thing where Carrot has this magnetism and everyone's like, oh, it's Corporate Carrot's army. And it's not an army, it's a sort of short-term militia. But then Detritus and Cuddy get really into it, and they start acting like you get more promotion the more people you recruit. Detritus is good at shouting at people, and all these people who are ready to square up to their enemies are now being made to march alongside them at fear of their lives. So the watch grows, and it's supposed to be a temporary thing, but they build on it, and then you can sort of see the starting of the watch as it becomes. Carrot goes to Vetinari and is saying, we need to open more watch houses. We need more resources. We need another dartboard.
We let the librarian play, and he just reaches over and hammers the darts into the board. And a fund for the
widows and orphans.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is the kind of thing where Vetinari in the previous book was almost surprised at how little they're asking. Well, now it's a bit more organised. And Carrot also insists that Sam Vimes has resigned as captain of the watch, but maybe they could resurrect Commander as a post. And Vimes, who I think probably wouldn't have done very well with retirement.
No, I think he would have been terrible in retirement.
Well, no, Sybil had arranged for him to go to a lot of meetings and be on a lot of boards of things.
Oh no, he would have done terribly at meetings and boards of things.
He absolutely hates sitting around having dinner with rich people, apart from his wife. But yes, that feels good because it feels like really the start of something. It's not just these weird little guys anymore. It's
no, you've got a lot more, and we will see in the next Guards book, more of those characters, more of the Guard being in the Watch being a full. It's no longer the Night Watch.
It's a police force rather than
it's the watch of the city.
Yeah,
no longer day. It's split between the day and the Night Watch. Although I always find it amusing that all of this stuff happens just during the night.
Well, it does. At one point, Angua actually thinks, "Oh, you're a copper all the time, but the city's only paying you for it for 10 hours."
It's just amusing. But I think also that the Day Watch are completely useless. I get the impression. So,
well, I think it's all just a bit like ceremonial guard type stuff. But yeah.
And I mean, there's lots more to talk about in the book. We see more about the Assassin's Guild. We get to actually see inside the Assassin's Guild.
We see the Fool's Guild as well.
We see inside the Fool's Guild.
Obviously, we've heard how unpleasant it is from the Fool who becomes King Verence in Lanka. But yeah, there's, again, the sense of that place as being a bit terrifying. We see a Fool funeral.
Yeah. We see the Beggars Guild.
We see the Beggars Guild, which turns out to be the oldest one.
And it's a more fleshing out of Ankh-Morpork.
Well, Kara obviously shows Angua all sorts of
kind of things. You talk about Ankh-Morpork being a city of many levels. We see the under.
Yes, because you keep saying it's built on loam, but actually Ankh-Morpork is built on is Ankh-Morpork.
So there's more. It turns out it has a sewer system, quite an effective one, if it was used.
It's only because it's summer and it's hot, so the river's really low. Because normally those would be filled with water. Yeah. Although, I mean, obviously for us it's winter, so they kept saying it's hot. I'm like, oh yeah, it's hot. It's always odd when you read a book at the wrong time of year.
So yeah, there is lots to the book. Well structured, well plotted.
A lot of good characters.
Yes, good character work. We liked the book. Mm-hmm. So unless we have anything more to say, I mean, let's be honest, we could go on about this for a while, trying to keep it running.
It did cause me to look up the origin of the seamstress euphemism, and that is an existing thing from history, which I kind of thought it would be.
I mean, yeah, a lot of these things are... But yes, so this is all good. We suggest you go and read. Definitely, if you've read Guards and enjoyed it, then this is just more of the same.
Although, I mean, I read it without having read Guards, and that was fine also.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, you definitely get more out of it. Yes, yeah. I'm just saying you get more out of it. So anyway, yes, next time we'll be on soul music. We're back to one of the Death books. This is one of we're riffing off music in general. I
feel like I will understand many more of the references.
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting to see what we get out of it more now. I've always enjoyed the Death ones, and soul music has been fun. And I painted my father a death on a motorcycle with Born to Rune on his back. Yeah. Anyway, thank you all very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Dining Table Discworld. You can find us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Dining Table Discworld. You can also find us on BlueSky at dtdiscworld. All our other contact information and credits for our music can be found in our show notes. Thank you for listening again, and we'll see you in our next episode.